So 16 seconds to play. Bills 16, Titans 15. Kevin Dyson is deep with Ike Bird. Do the Titans have a miracle left in them in what has been a magical season to this point? If they do, they need it now. Christie kicks it high and short. Going to be fielded by Lorenzo Neal at the 25. Pitches it back to Wycheck. He throws it across the field to Dyson.
He's got something.
30,
He's
40,
got something.
50,
He's got it.
40,
He's got it.
20, 10.
He's got it.
End zone. Touchdown Titans. There are no flags on the field. It's a miracle. Tennessee has pulled a miracle. A miracle for the Titans.
This is the Lee Company Countdown to Kickoff. Brent Doherty, Don Davenport, and Ron Slay. That get you, Don?
Chills.
Definitely. Lee Company, all you need. Visit them online at leecompany.com. This is Mike Vrabel's 100th game as head coach. Titans and Dolphins tonight. Dolphins a 14-point favorite. 7:15 to kick. You can listen right here on 104.5 The Zone. The only coach in Titans Oilers franchise history that has coached more games than Mike Vrabel is this guy. Jeff Fisher, former Titans coach, joins us now. Jeff, what's up? How are you, man?
I'm doing great, guys. And to Don's point, that's like, wow, you got chills. It seems like every time you hear that, it's just such a special moment in history. And I appreciate you guys bringing it up. And what's it's a moment in time here where, you know, we're saddened. We're grieving the loss of Frank. But, you know, just what occurred to me is, what would Frank want right now? Frank would want to celebrate his life. He would want us talking all kinds of things about him and then stop immediately, you know, before kickoff and go. You know, I mean, here we are we're talking about Frank 2 hours before Titans kickoff on a Monday night game against a really good football team. And what would Frank want, man? That's what we would want. He'd want all the focus to go on the Titans.
Yeah, and he would also want all of us to give him crap on some level, right? Like, and I know that you were a big prankster. Did you ever have anything for Frank back in the day?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we didn't get the prankster stuff going until we got settled, you know. But it was, Frank, there were so many things. And, you know, it's just been memory laden over the last 24 hours. And, you know, just going back, I mean, I don't think many people realize this, but in 95, we had drafted Steve. We got through our off season, and Norv Turner was the head coach of the Washington Redskins. And Norv and I had gone way back. He actually was my receiver coach at USC, and we were good friends at that time. And so we had joint practices at Marysville College, and you know they had just drafted Heath Schuler, and they were kind of doing their little promotion. And you know we said, sure, we'll come back and have a joint practice. Well, practice. Couple days went by, and I was talking to Norv about his roster. He was talking to me about mine, and I didn't know. You know, we were coming off a miserable season, and didn't have any tight ends because we were running shoot offense, and we started talking about this tight end. I think it was number 46 in training camp there for the Redskins, and Norv didn't think that he was going to make his team because he was just kind of in between. He was like a jack of all trades. You know, he could go in motion, he could play fullback, he could get off the line. He had great hands. He's going to be a good special teamer. And so anyway, you know, we kept an eye on Frank and then knew he wasn't going to make it, knew the claiming order. We were going to be, you know, way at the top of the claiming order. And so elected not to trade for him, claimed him, and that's how it started. And, you know, it was just in 95, 96, you know, those of you guys that, you know, the people that were around understand that those weren't easy years. You played 95, 96 in Houston, don't know where you're going to be playing, going through all kinds of stuff. And then, you know, we moved to town and literally Frank was the first one off the bus. You know, I said it back then and I you know, I say it now. I mean, he came in and he just embraced the opportunity. He pulled everybody with him and, you know, he just, you know, he just fit in so well. There was no task that you would ask of Frank that was too big or too small. He just did everything. And I remember how many times we were sitting in the office, just the two of us going, he's just like, how can I help? How can I help? You know, well, Frank, hey, it's a challenging rookie class here. You know, go to these two guys and make sure they're good and settled. I think they can contribute. And he just do things like that, you know. That was the way he was wired.
Well, it's interesting that so he got caught up kind of, I guess, in Washington as being kind of a tweener player. Like, what? Yeah. How did you envision him in your offense? I mean, we obviously saw how it ended up playing out, but is that what you saw initially?
Well, it was. Yeah, it's what we wanted. I had hired Jerry Rome. I was familiar with the Redskin offense and the difficulty it presented, to defenses, and so brought Jerry in, right off the bat, and wanted that type of offense, and that it had a big on the line tight end, and then they had a movement guy, and so the movement guy could line up at fullback, he could motion, and just, it was just that. I think Frank was one of the true H backs when personnel people talk about and describe it. Frank was one of those two guys, but over time, obviously he learned how to block. He learned how to be the guy on the field, and the one tight end package, 11 personnel that people refer to now. And he just kind of a jack of all trades. He could throw it. He was an athlete. It was competitive. I mean, he was a backup holder if you needed him, and he just create the mismatches for Frank. But he just athletic ability, and then the other thing was the durability. I mean, he hated to miss practice. He never missed practice. He took good care of himself, and then. As he got a little bit older, he played golf a little bit longer in the off season, and then he'd work himself into shape, and played a lot of fun rounds of golf with Frank. I mean, he just was a true competitor, and I'm gonna miss that man. And as are a lot of people.
So we've had a lot of people have called in and told their Frank stories, and they've run into him at different places, and they just talked about how kind he always was. What kind of a locker room guy, like what kind of a teammate was Frank?
Well, if you could get that mold, that's the one you want. He was a great teammate. Got along with everybody, was competitive. He'd get feisty. I mean, you don't back anybody in the corner in the NFL, and Frank was one of them. He'd get feisty, but he was a great guy in the locker room. And, he wasn't the guy that was going to call a team meeting, and be late for it like Eddie was. But he did, he did have a lot. He did a lot behind the scenes, and he's just a great teammate. I mean, I've got some really, really sympathetic, meaningful, correspondence over the last 24 hours. One from Peyton Manning, one from Chris Long that never knew him, but he knew how I felt about players, and he goes, "This guy must have been a great dude." And I go, "Yeah, he was. He was a great teammate." So Don, that's what he was. He was that model teammate. Stayed out of trouble. Just, he was always he would subtly do the extra things. That required as he got older in his career to maintain, that ability level that he had. And, he was a guy who stayed after and caught balls off the junk machines and goofed around. And, he and Bruce Matthews were always competing. Bruce was, very, very competitive and, outside of football. And it may mean these guys are over, during a special teams period playing competitive games with a football, They just find ways to compete. That's how he was.
Yeah, we kept hearing about Bruce Matthews and just inventing games to beat you at.
Coach, you've been blessed to be around a lot of great players, man, especially from this Titans era. If you had to create a player, I want you to create a player for me. Give me body type, give me IQ, give me heart, and give me the durability. If you had to create one, where would Frank Wycheck fall in that category?
Well, I've been around long enough to know, as you say, to be able to answer loaded questions. That answer is Frank Wycheck.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that's what he is. That's what he was. I mean, there's different ability levels at all different positions, and but Frank was just one of those guys that could do everything.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had to line him up outside on the slot, we did it. I mean, we get a matchup on a safety, he'd win the matchup. He's going to be the linebacker. He's going to find a way to execute his block, and he paid attention. I mean, he paid attention to the little detail things. I mean, I mean, the Music City Miracle is proof of that.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing that happened in that whole season, every Saturday when we practiced the plays, the one thing we didn't do was practice that particular kick. So, you know, all kinds of kicks happened you guys know the stories, and then that ball goes up in the air. I'm going, oh my gosh, Lo Neal's going to catch this. What's he gonna do? Well, he knew what to do with it. Get it to Frank. That was a rule. Hey, man, anybody handles this ball, get it to Frank. And, that's what Lo did. And, Frank knew what to do with it.
So that was the emergency. Because I've talked to Lo Neal about that, and he said he told Frank before the play, he said, they're going to kick it to me. Look at me. They're going to kick it to me, and I'm going to get it to you as fast as I can. And so that was the emergency route, is just whoever gets it, get it to Frank?
Yeah, that was the whole thing. I mean, and so if the ball went to the front line or went some other place, make sure you get this ball to Frank somehow, and then build the wall. And that's what, obviously that's what we did. But I mean, you all know that Kevin Dyson wasn't supposed to be in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was Derek Mason's play, and Derek was had suffered a little setback concussion wise and was out. Then Anthony Dorsett, he was cramping up, and then I just happened to grab Dyson, during the TV timeout, told him to stay outside and stay 5 yards behind the ball and stay outside the numbers. He looked at me and I go, the numbers, those things right there, 50, 40, 30, those are numbers. Stay outside the numbers, and stay behind the ball. And 5 yards was the coaching point, and sometimes players get things backwards. I think he misunderstood that to be inches.
So he said that Dice going to join us tomorrow at 4:00 anyway. But he said all of those things that you just said. But he said that when Frank got it and turned to throw to him, he immediately was worried about how far up he was and tried to get farther back. When Frank made that throw, did you know it was a lateral, or were you kind of worried about it?
Well, I saw Byron Boston, the wing official on the far sideline. He was the head linesman. I saw him when Frank turned and threw it. I was looking through it, and I saw the coaches look at different things, crazy things on the field during plays, but I saw him signal lateral.
Yeah. Okay.
So at that point, I didn't know. At that point, I didn't know how the play was going to result, but I knew it was going to be ruled a lateral on the field, and then obviously replay's hard to overturn that.
So as Dyson's running down the sideline, what were you doing? Like the iconic picture of Steve McNair, with the surprised look on his face. What were you doing?
Well, up until he was at midfield, maybe moving into the plus 40, plus 35 range, I was yelling, "Get out of bounds!" Because field goal gave us hope. So it's just one of those. Okay, at least get out of bounds, stop the clock, and let's take some shots at the end zones and all those kind of things. But it was get out of bounds, and I looked down further to my left, and it was like, "Go, baby, go!" So. And then it was, after that, it was, okay, y'all remember what the score was. We ended up, we ended up by 5.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you're up by 5? You go for 2, right? So I didn't think that we could, when the ruling came down, the ruling on the field stands, I didn't think emotionally we'd be able to run an offensive play, a 2-point play. And so I just said, let's just kick it. And then, do you guys remember what happened after we kicked the extra point and kicked off?
Well, most people think the game ended with that play, and it's not true. I was going to ask you about that. I don't remember, actually.
They ran the next kick, the following kickoff, I believe, either across midfield or close to midfield by the time we tackled them. So my heart was in my throat. Just only because, I made that, coaches make decisions. You get field, there's no analytics for that one. So, it was just, we're not going to be able to execute it. We're not going to get the ball in. How are we going to run a 2-point play with this euphoria? So I just kicked it. But yeah, that was it, man. And it is a little side note. And he hates when I talk about this, but my oldest son at the time, Brandon, was helping on the sideline because back then all you had was Polaroids. And so he was running Polaroids to different coaches and just busy the whole day. And he happened to be standing down there. And And if you look at the highlight, you see a young man jumping up and down on the 5, and then the goal line. And then when he scored, he's just jumping up and down. And so after the game, you can imagine the kind of celebration that was going on at my house. And he kept saying over and over, he goes, there I am, there I am. And I finally said, what are you doing out of the bench area? I mean, you're standing there on that 5-yard line. That if you bump that official, you're almost in the, oh my gosh, if you bump that official, you know what happens? And I felt bad. I mean, his mouth dropped, and I don't know what he was thinking. And I go, no, it's okay. It would have been enforced on the kickoff. Everything would have counted. But, it was one of those deals. But yeah, it's I got to reminisce, and we got to go through it. I think it was season before last when Titans hosted the Bills on a Monday night. Alan Lowry and I got to go through. We did a little feature on it, and it was cool.
I remember that. Yeah.
So
anyway, go ahead.
No, I was going to say touchdown throwback. So Alan Lowry comes up with this play, shows it to you. You think, oh, that's great. That'll work. Or do you have questions?
Well, no, the story behind it was we mimicked and copied for years the Stanford cow play. So what we did was in those situations, we put everybody that had any kind of ball handling skill on the field just to keep the ball alive. And so, we would practice it, every week. And, sometimes we'd have 5 guys covering. Sometimes we've had 15 guys covering, just to practice once a week and just to get the guys used to throwing the ball around and make sure and this. And then, finally, right prior to our final cut down that year in '99, Alan came in and said, hey, I want to change something. I saw something here. And I said, that's fine. So we waited till we had our regular roster, and then we put it in to start the regular season. We just call it the home run throwback, and we practice it every Saturday. And so that was the history behind it.
Well, that Jeff Fisher, former Titans coach, with us on 3HL, that run to the Super Bowl, that has to be, as a head coach, and that group of guys too was so special. That just, I mean, how often do you think about that run with the game in Buffalo and with the win at Indianapolis where Eddie George is running down the middle of the field? He told us he's looking at the Jumbotron as a rearview mirror. Winning in Jacksonville for the 3rd time. I mean, how often do you think about all of that?
Well, it wasn't really, people think, they say it wasn't supposed to happen. I mean, my biggest concern going into the playoffs was, okay, hey, we're in the playoffs, we're playing Buffalo, was we didn't have a whole lot of playoff experience. And I told the guys all week long that after we win this one, we'll look back and say this was the hardest one of all. The first one, that first playoff win for a young football team, is a hard one. Mm-hmm. Once you get that under your belt, then the expectations change, and then obviously the big game there at Indy, and then everything that went on down in Jacksonville. The thing that was interesting about the whole experience for the listeners is it was the last time that there was just one game between the championship game. 1 week between the championship game and the Super Bowl. So we came back from beating Jacksonville. You all remember we pulled in the stadium. I'll never forget that. And the buses, and that thing was half full and people were going crazy. Well, after we left, we went back and had a team meeting because the team was leaving the next morning. And they had to go down to Atlanta. And so, the team left, and I went with them, left the staff behind to game plan, and they came in Tuesday night. We put the game plan in Wednesday, and we kicked it off Sunday. So that was a blur. So, it's unlike any other Super Bowl, or most of them, all of them since, where you got 2 weeks. And so it was a week, and it was a challenge, and it was a blur. And, but we were fortunate to get most of those guys back. They were playoff hardened, and the expectation level was high, and we had a better team the next year.
Yeah,
and
that's what
we
the players say.
Best record. And we sat there and just waited for Baltimore to come in, and then it doesn't work out. We blocked 2 punts, and they go sideways out of bounds, and Dilfer, I don't think, had a first down the second half, but they won, and they went on to win the world championship. So that's the NFL. But those are truly highlights of the early experience here in Nashville. And I'm gonna circle back to Frank because Frank was he was one of the guys. You know, I mean, you think about everything that we're able to do over the difficulty that we encountered from from the move and then the travel and playing in Memphis and then playing at Vanderbilt and then finally getting in the stadium.